He dialed 911 for help, his voice urgent, his words desperate. A simple theft, his air conditioner gone. But within minutes, what began as a plea for justice turned into a blood-soaked confrontation in the stairwell of a Bronx apartment building. The man who called for protection ended up face-to-face with the officers meant to protect him, and in a matter of seconds, a single gunshot would leave him bleeding on the floor, his life hanging by a thread. This is not just a story of a shooting, it's a story of misunderstanding, of fear, and of the devastating power of words lost in translation. Because one question still echoes through Mott Haven tonight: did language turn a cry for help into a near-death sentence? Before we dive in, if you're new here, this is Unraveled Crime. We uncover the stories that leave communities shaken and questions unanswered. Subscribe now and join us, because the truth deserves to be unraveled. Sunday evening, January 12, 2025. The Bronx. Cold air presses against the buildings in Mott Haven, a neighborhood where shadows hang heavy between the aging brick apartments and the flickering stairwell lights. In one of these buildings on East 148th Street, a man makes a call, 32 years old. His voice low, tense, his words spoken in Spanish. He tells the 911 operator that his air conditioner has been stolen. For him, this isn't just about a machine. It's about violation, frustration, and anger. The operator, unable to understand, brings in a translator. The man insists. He wants police. Minutes later, squad cars roll into the block. NYPD officers enter the building. Their radios crackle. Their flashlights cut through the dim light of the hallways. They search the apartment where the theft was reported, but the caller isn't there. He's already outside, confronting someone he believes is the thief. Neighbors hear shouting, words sharp and fast, bouncing off the concrete courtyard. In his hand, clutched tight, a kitchen knife. Some say it was for intimidation, some say it was for protection. But when officers begin to move through the stairwell, that blade becomes the focus of everything that follows. It begins with a voice on the line. The man's Spanish steady but strained. He tells dispatchers about the stolen air conditioner. To him, this is serious. To him, this is urgent. But something shifts in the chain of communication. His words are filtered through an interpreter, and by the time they reach police officers, pieces of context are already lost. The dispatcher doesn't ride along. The interpreter doesn't enter that building. Only the officers do. And when they arrive, they're armed not with translators, but with commands they've repeated countless times before. Commands in English: drop it, wait, stop. Simple words, but words the man might never have fully understood. Words that would become the thin line between compliance and tragedy. The officers climb the narrow stairwell. Their boots echo on the concrete. Their voices bounce off the walls. Their flashlights cut across shadows that swallow most of the corridor. And then, movement. The man re-enters, storming up from the courtyard below, gripping the knife tight in his fist. He's not silent. He's shouting. His words sharp, rapid, all in Spanish. The officers answer with their own. Wait! Wait! One officer raises a hand to halt him. Drop the knife! But the words don't land. The gap between them isn't just distance, it's language, it's fear, it's time running out. Seconds. That's all it takes for a call for help to collapse into a deadly standoff. In that dim stairwell, it feels like there's no air left. Only echoes. Only fear. The man keeps climbing. The knife glints under the flashlight beams. His face tense, unreadable. To him, maybe he's still proving a point, still demanding justice for the theft. To the officers, he's a threat closing in. They don't see a victim. They see a suspect with a blade, advancing fast. Wait! They shout again. Drop it! Their commands sharper now, voices cracking with urgency. But he doesn't stop. He doesn't drop the knife. Whether he can't understand, won't understand, or simply refuses, we'll never fully know. All anyone knows is what came next. The stairwell is tight. Too tight. Each step the man takes closes the gap faster than the officers can process. His knife is raised, his shouts bouncing off the walls. One officer steps back, his hand shaking slightly as he points his gun. Another echoes the command, Drop it now!" But the man doesn't stop. He pushes forward. He's only feet away. And in that instant, the choice is made. The crack of gunfire rips through the stairwell, then another, and another. The man's body jolts, he stumbles, his back slams against the wall, then crumples to the floor. The knife slips from his hand, clattering down the concrete steps. Silence follows, but it's not real silence. It's the ringing in everyone's ears, the gasps of neighbors peeking through doors, the panicked breathing of the officers who just pulled the trigger. "Shots fired!" one officer shouts into his radio, his voice raw with adrenaline. Send a bus now!" That's NYPD code. Call for an ambulance. Blood pools beneath the man. His chest rises, falters, rises again. The officers kneel down, their hands moving quick, trying to stop the bleeding. Tourniquets, pressure. Commands barked at one another. "Get the kit! Hurry!" For a moment, their training shifts from defense to survival, not their own survival, but his. And yet, it feels too late. The stairwell, once filled with shouting and warning, now carries only the sound of groans, of fading life. The same neighbors who'd whispered behind doors now stare wide-eyed from cracked openings, their faces pale, their voices silent. They've just seen a man gunned down in their own building. When paramedics arrive, the scene explodes again. Stretchers, bags of medical gear, the sound of scissors tearing through clothes as they work to save him.
Now today to some new developments in a police shooting in the Bronx.
The NYPD says the man police shot turned out to be the one who called 911 in the first place. New video shows the moment the officer fired her gun inside the hallway of an apartment building in Mott Haven. Alice Gaynor spoke with residents who live there.
In this security video from around 5:45 Sunday night, provided by a resident in the apartment building on 148th Street, you see two NYPD officers enter. Out of view, you can hear voices, and less than a minute later, though we cannot see or really hear exactly what happened, the NYPD says a man was coming up the stairs with a kitchen knife in his hand. Detectives say one officer told the man to wait and drop the knife and put her hand up for him to stop. But police say the man quickly approached the officers, and that's when one fired her weapon, shooting the man in the torso. We're told the man shot by police spoke Spanish, and they're investigating to see if the officers understood him and whether he understood them.
This situation was extremely fast-moving, lasting only a few seconds.
The 32-year-old who was shot was taken to Lincoln Hospital and will be okay. Police believe he's the reason officers showed up in the first place, calling 911 to report an air conditioner being stolen. After calling, they say, he exited the building and confronted the male at the side courtyard. An interpreter was used when he called 911. Juan Rivera had been out walking his dog when this happened. You see him returning as lots of officers filed into the hallway. He says he's lived here for more than 50 years.
Are there thefts in this building?
A lot. A lot.
That's why he says he has multiple security cameras. But other longtime residents say they feel safe here.
The building is very, very secure.
Police say the incident was captured on both officers' body-worn cameras. And as you can see here in the building, there are multiple cameras. We don't know whether or not they work. The landlord who was here before would not answer any questions. In the Mott Haven section of the Bronx, Alice Gaynor, CBS News, New York. And the shooting is now being investigated by the NYPD's Force Investigations Division. No word on what happened to the suspect in that alleged air conditioner theft.
Police tape unrolled across the courtyard, radios buzzing with updates, residents clustered in the cold, whispering the same question over and over. What just happened? The man is rushed to Harlem Hospital. Red and blue lights paint the night as the ambulance speeds away. But deep down the officers already know how this story is likely to end. And within hours, the confirmation comes. He is dead. In minutes, a theft complaint became a deadly shooting. In hours, it became a case file. And by the next morning, it was headlines. But headlines can't capture the full picture. They can't capture the language barrier, the stairwell's claustrophobia, the split-second decision between command and trigger. They can't capture the question that hung heavy in the air long after the blood was cleaned from the floor. Did it have to happen this way? By dawn, the Bronx apartment building no longer looked like a crime scene. It looked like a fortress. Yellow tape stretched across stairwells, hallways, the courtyard. Detectives moved in and out, their faces locked in stone. Evidence markers dotted the floor. A single knife, bagged and tagged, sat on a table in the command post. The NYPD immediately launched an internal investigation. 2 officers suspended from street duty were placed under review, their service weapons collected, their body-worn cameras pulled for analysis. Every second of footage, every command shouted, every gunshot fired would now be dissected frame by frame, because that's how it works. A man was dead, and when NYPD bullets end a life, the department must answer one question. Was it justified? According to the initial police statement, the officers followed protocol. They issued repeated warnings in both English and Spanish. They attempted to de-escalate. The man advanced with a knife, leaving them with no choice. Their actions, they said, were necessary. Their actions, they said, saved lives. But on the street, that narrative didn't land so easily. To neighbors who watched from their doorways, the truth felt murkier. Some swore the man seemed confused, not aggressive. Others whispered that he might not have understood the commands at all. One question floated in every conversation, louder than the official press release. Did it have to end with bullets? By afternoon, protests gathered outside the building, small at first, then larger. Residents held candles, their voices rising with anger and grief. They weren't defending the man's actions, but they were demanding answers. Why was lethal force the first solution? Why, in a city filled with mental health crises and cultural divides, did it feel like language and misunderstanding were still a death sentence? Signs appeared in the crowd. Justice for the Bronx. We need answers. NYPD must be held accountable. The chant was clear. The wound wasn't just the loss of a life. It was the familiar sting of distrust between community and police. Within hours, local leaders weighed in. Bronx Borough President Vanessa Gibson called for transparency, demanding every piece of body cam footage be released. Other elected officials echoed the same sentiment. The public deserved the full truth, not just the NYPD's version, not just the headlines, the whole truth. This was a tragedy, one official said, and tragedies demand accountability. But accountability means different things to different people. To some, the officers did exactly what they were trained to do. To others, their training wasn't enough. That in a city as diverse as New York, shouting commands wasn't the same as communication. And to the family of the man who died, one fact mattered more than any debate. He was gone, and nothing could bring him back. As the protests grew louder, the NYPD investigation pressed forward in silence. Evidence was reviewed, witnesses questioned. The narrative reshaped itself with every new detail. But one question refused to fade, no matter how many statements were made, no matter how many officials weighed in. Did the system fail that night, or did it work exactly as designed? By the second day, the shooting wasn't just a Bronx story, it was a New York City story. By the third day, it was national. Headlines flashed across television screens and phone alerts. Knife-wielding man shot by NYPD. But each outlet told it differently. Some emphasized the danger to officers. Others highlighted the man's possible confusion. A few focused only on the image of blood on a stairwell floor. In the battle for clicks and airtime, the nuances disappeared. What was left was a fractured narrative. To some viewers, this was another case of police bravery under fire. To others, it was yet another example of lethal force used where other tools might have sufficed. And perception matters. In communities where trust in police is already thin, perception can be the difference between cooperation and silence, between calm and protest. Every camera shot of neighbors lighting candles, every clip of officials demanding answers, every shaky phone video of flashing lights outside the building deepened the divide. On social media, the story caught fire. Arguments erupted in comment sections and live streams. Hashtags trended. Bronx shooting. Justice for the Bronx. One side said the officers had no choice. The other said choice was the very thing missing, that there were always alternatives if police were trained and equipped to use them. As the debate raged, one detail stood out like a warning light: language. Witnesses claimed the man might not have understood the English commands. Some officers shouted in Spanish, but was it enough? Did fear, echo, and panic drown out meaning? Or was the language gap so wide that no command, English or Spanish, could have truly connected in that moment? This wasn't just about one man. It was about thousands of interactions that play out in a city where nearly half the population speaks a language other than English at home. What happens when a life or death command is given, and the person on the other end simply doesn't understand? Experts weighed in. Some argued that this was a failure of police training, that officers weren't just protectors, they needed to be communicators, negotiators, and crisis managers in a city of 8 million voices. Others said that was unrealistic. In a split-second confrontation with a weapon, expecting officers to bridge cultural divides was asking the impossible. But impossible didn't satisfy the grieving family. It didn't calm the neighbors who now avoided the stairwell where the blood once stained the floor, and it didn't silence the growing outrage that echoed beyond the Bronx. As reporters pressed for answers, as protests swelled outside precinct doors, as city leaders called for calm, the NYPD investigation remained quiet. Behind closed doors, detectives combed through footage, timelines, witness statements. But outside, the silence only fueled speculation. Because in New York, silence is never neutral. It's a message, and the people were listening. While the NYPD released statements, while city leaders called for transparency, the family of the man who died spoke only through tears. To them, he wasn't the suspect. He wasn't the man with the knife. He was a brother, a father, a son, someone who had walked into an apartment building and never walked back out. At a press conference days later, their voices trembled as they asked the question that had haunted them since that night. Why wasn't there another way? They acknowledged his struggles. They didn't deny the fear his actions may have caused. But they insisted he didn't deserve to die in a stairwell, surrounded by strangers with guns drawn. He needed help, one family member said. What he got was bullets. Civil rights attorneys stepped forward, pledging to investigate the case independently. They demanded the release of all body cam footage, not just carefully edited clips. They promised to hold the NYPD accountable, arguing that lethal force had become the default instead of the last resort. Community activists echoed those calls. They reminded the city of past shootings, cases where justified never meant right. They drew a line between this death and the long history of distrust that scarred neighborhoods like the Bronx. This isn't just about one man, an activist shouted at a rally. This is about all of us, because if it can happen to him, it can happen to anyone. Weeks passed, evidence was collected, witnesses questioned, but the official investigation remained quiet, too quiet. Every unanswered question became fuel for speculation. Did the officers follow proper protocol? Was the language barrier real? Were there alternatives left unexplored? The silence only deepened the divide, and as time dragged on, the protests didn't fade, they grew. The Bronx had seen many tragedies before, but this one cut differently. It wasn't just about crime. It wasn't just about police. It was about trust. And trust, once broken, is nearly impossible to rebuild. Late one night, weeks after the shooting, reporters finally caught a whisper from inside the investigation. An internal review had uncovered something not yet released to the public. Something about the body cam footage that raised more questions than answers. But what was it? A command not heard. A shot fired too early. A moment of hesitation that could change the entire narrative. The truth remained locked behind closed doors, and until it was released, the Bronx and the entire city would be left with only one certainty: a man was dead, and the questions surrounding his death were only getting louder. Thank you for watching Unraveled Crime. The Bronx shooting shows how fast chaos can erupt, and how one decision can change everything. If this story shocked you, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss what's next. Like, share, and drop your thoughts in the comments. Was this justice or a tragedy that could have been prevented? Until next time, stay alert, and remember, Every headline hides a deeper story.